Imagine being taxed for every grain of salt you consume. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? But this was the harsh reality during the dark period of British rule in India. A time when even the most basic of needs, like salt, was made a luxury by the introduction of the salt tax. This tax was not just about salt, but a symbol of the British exploiting Indian resources to fill their own coffers. The economic policies of the British were not designed with the welfare of Indians in mind. Rather, they were carefully crafted to benefit the British Empire. India, with its vast resources and wealth, was seen merely as a cash cow. The British not only taxed the Indians heavily, but also controlled trade, creating a system where wealth flowed from India to Britain, leaving the Indian populace impoverished and struggling. Yes, the British rule in India was nothing short of a calculated economic exploitation. The British didn't just exploit India's resources, they also systematically dismantled its power structures. This is a startling truth we must confront when we delve into the story of the Indian subcontinent under British rule. It's important to understand that India, before the British, was a mosaic of diverse kingdoms, each with its own administrative systems, cultures, and languages. However, the British, with their agenda, began to systematically replace these traditional systems with their own. They established a new bureaucratic system, modeled after their own, and often appointed British officials to top positions, effectively stripping India of its autonomy. This was not just about control, it was about reshaping an entire society. The British understood that to control a nation, they needed to control its institutions. They introduced English education, which was a significant departure from the traditional Indian education system. English became the language of the government, the courts, and the elite. This was not a benign act of cultural exchange, it was a calculated move to marginalize Indian languages and cultures. The impact of this linguistic shift was profound. With English as the language of power, those who could not speak it were left at a disadvantage. The divide between the English-educated elite and the masses widened, creating social rifts that are still felt today. But the British didn't stop at language. They also introduced new laws and legal systems, often disregarding existing ones. They enforced their own moral codes, often clashing with the diverse cultural practices of India. This systematic stripping of power was not without resistance. There were revolts, rebellions, and movements. But the British, with their superior military power, often managed to quash these uprisings, further consolidating their rule. By the end of the British rule, India's administration had been completely overhauled, with far-reaching consequences. The echoes of this period reverberate even today, shaping India's political, social, and cultural landscape in ways that are both visible and hidden. And as we continue to explore this history, we must remember that understanding the past is key to navigating the present and the future. 1857 marked a turning point in the history of British rule in India. This year saw an uprising that shook the colonial power to its very core, the Indian Rebellion of 1857. It was a monumental event, a culmination of the simmering discontent that had been brewing among Indians for years. The spark that ignited this rebellion was the introduction of the new Enfield rifle by the British East India Company. The cartridges of these rifles were greased with animal fat, which deeply offended both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. This, combined with the ongoing resentment towards British policies, was the final straw. It triggered a widespread mutiny among the Indian sepoys, or soldiers, setting off a chain of events that would forever alter the course of India's history. The British response to the rebellion was swift and brutal. Entire villages were razed, rebels were hanged or shot, and atrocities were committed on both sides. The British wanted to send a clear message: dissent would not be tolerated. But instead of quelling the rebellion, their actions only served to fuel the flames of resistance. Despite the brutal suppression, the rebellion was not in vain. It was a watershed moment that irrevocably changed the way India was governed by the British. The British Crown took over direct control from the East India Company, marking the beginning of the British Raj. Many key policy changes were implemented, including increased representation for Indians in the civil service and judiciary. But perhaps the most important outcome of the rebellion was the awakening it sparked among the people of India. It united them in a common cause and gave them a taste of what they could achieve if they stood together against their oppressors. The rebellion of 1857 was a clear symbol of Indian resistance, a reminder that the Indians were not willing to be passive recipients of British imperialism. It was a testament to their resilience, their courage, and their undying spirit of freedom. The aftermath of the rebellion brought about significant changes in the administration of India. The year 1857 marked a turning point in the history of Indian administration. The uprising, while unsuccessful, brought to light the deep-seated resentment towards the East India Company's rule. This compelled the British Crown to intervene, leading to a shift in power dynamics. In the wake of this upheaval, the British government took direct control of India from the East India Company. This transition was more than just a changing of the guard. It was the dawn of a new era in Indian administration, one that saw the introduction of numerous reforms and policies designed to prevent future uprisings. One of the significant changes was the establishment of the Indian Civil Service in 1858. This was a strategic move by the British government to instill a sense of involvement among Indians in the administration. The idea was to create a buffer between the rulers and the ruled, to mitigate the hostility and build a bridge of understanding. However, the entry into this service was not without its challenges. Indians had to travel to London to take the examination, a journey not many could afford. In addition, Indians were also included in the lower echelons of the administration. This was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gave Indians a taste of power and authority. On the other hand, it was a clever ploy by the British to keep the Indians content, while they continued to exercise ultimate control. These administrative changes, while seemingly progressive, were implemented with the primary objective of securing British rule in India. They were not born out of a genuine desire for the welfare of the Indian people, but out of the need to safeguard British interests. Nevertheless, these reforms led to an increased awareness among Indians about their rights and the workings of the administration. This awareness, in turn, fueled the desire for self-rule and laid the foundation for the independence movement. Even in the face of adversity, India began to adapt and evolve, setting the stage for a long journey towards independence. The British left India in 1947, but their legacy continues to shape India's administration even today. The British Raj, which spanned almost 2 centuries, left an indelible imprint on various facets of Indian administration. The most prominent of these is perhaps the legal system. Drawing extensively from British law, the Indian Penal Code was introduced in 1860 during the British reign. This code, with its roots in British jurisprudence, continues to be the backbone of criminal law in India. It's a testament to the enduring influence of the British legal tradition. The education system too owes much of its structure to the British. In an attempt to create a class of Indians, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect, the British introduced English medium education. The system emphasized rote learning and examination-oriented teaching, characteristics that persist in many Indian schools today. However, it's not just the systems and structures that are remnants of the British rule. The English language itself, introduced by the British, is now an integral part of Indian society. It's not only the language of administration, but also a socio-economic marker, often creating a divide between the English-speaking elites and the vernacular masses. But it's important to note that these influences are not purely negative or positive. They are complex, intertwined with India's own historical, cultural, and social contexts. The English language, for instance, while divisive, has also been instrumental in unifying a country with hundreds of languages and dialects. The British legacy is a double-edged sword. It's a part of India's colonial past, a symbol of oppression and exploitation, but it's also a part of India's present, shaping its administration, its education, its language. As we reflect on the past, we must also strive to create an administrative system that is truly representative of India's diverse and dynamic spirit.